Alright, in today's Photoshop tutorial, I'm going to be showing you how to make this gaming thumbnail for YouTube. First off, I made a document that is 1920 by 1080 and I made the resolution 72. That's your typical screen resolution. First thing I usually do is I get my character that I want to be the subject of the thumbnail, and in this case it's going to be the Master Chief from Halo. The easiest way I've found usually to select my subject is to just go up here to select and go down to subject. Make sure you actually have your layer selected or this won't be highlighted. So we're going to go down here to select subject. It's going to make an automatic selection for you, and it's probably not going to be perfect, so I'm going to have to go in and adjust it. So we're going to go in here and we're going to use the quick selection tool to clean up this selection. I believe it is the W key on your keyboard. If you don't see it on your toolbar, you can just hold down on either the object selection or the magic wand tool and it'll be under there. So we're just going to go in here and we're going to remove what we don't want and add in what we do. Alright, that's looking pretty good. Now what I need to do is actually get this character on his own layer without the background. So the easiest way to do that is actually to just jump cut it, and the shortcut for that is Control J. I believe it's Command J on a Mac. So when you do that, it's going to take your selection and just put it on its own layer. You're going to want to turn the layer off you were just working on so you have it for later in case you need it. And now I'm going to resize this so I can actually put it where it needs to be at the correct size that it needs to be for later. Obviously you can always adjust this, so we're going to leave him right here for now and come back to him later. I'm going to turn this layer off and then I'm going to go and find my background layer. All of these images were pulled from Google. I just figured faster for you guys if I didn't show that. So anyway, I went to Google and I searched Halo Infinite. It should have released today. I believe it was supposed to come out on the 8th. So we're going to go ahead and resize this again with your transform tool, which is Control T, I believe Command T on a Mac, and then we're just going to resize it. Now, my idea here is the background isn't really supposed to be drawing that much attention, so what I'm going to do is put a blur on it. I'm going to go up here to Filter and down to Gaussian Blur. So we need to go to Blur, we need to go to Gaussian Blur, and I'm going to put a 10-point radius on it, and then I'm just going to hit enter. It just kind of takes away the focus of it a little bit, which is what I'm looking for. I'm then going to go over to my layers panel and hit the lock button so that I don't accidentally move this later on. I'm going to go back to the character layer we were just working on. I'm going to turn that on. I'm going to have to reposition it because it got moved. What I'm going to do is actually add some layer styles to this. In order to get into that panel, you go over here in your layers panel. Beside the layer name, you want to double click and it'll pop this open. I'm going to put a stroke. You know the one I'm talking about, that white line that everybody uses around their subjects. So we're gonna go down here and we are gonna find the stroke, and it looks a little bit small and a little jagged, and I'm gonna zoom in and show you guys up close what I mean. I'm not sure exactly what I did, but I'm not gonna make an exact replica. I'm gonna do everything in the same way, but it's probably gonna turn out a little bit different. So we're gonna add a stroke. We're going to go ahead and we're going to add a drop shadow. That's a very subtle drop shadow, and it's probably like that because the opacity's down and the size isn't up high enough at the moment. So we're just going to increase it a little bit. I'll leave it like that for now and we can come back and readjust it. It's hard to tell without all of the other elements in place here. Anyways, I'm going to go ahead and hit OK. We're going to zoom in and we're going to look at this a little bit. So when you make a selection, if your selection isn't smooth, your stroke around your subject is going to look kind of ragged and messed up. I was looking for the right word there. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to reselect the Master Chief here by holding down Control and then clicking on the thumbnail. That automatically selects whatever in that current layer. I'm going to zoom out a little bit. I'm using Control- for that. And then I'm going to go into the Select and Mask panel. You do that by going to Select and then down to Select and Mask. And all I'm really going to do here is smooth out my selection and maybe shift my edge in a little bit here. We're going to go ahead and shift this smooth it. And we're going to shift this maybe a percentage. We're not going to go crazy with this. I always put a small amount of feather on here. And what's important about this panel is this option right down here, output to. I've made the mistake of saying selection a lot, but what I want to do here is put new layer with layer mask. That way it just jumps it to a new layer with a mask. You can edit the mask and then take a look and see if it was enough smoothing. It looks like it's going to need a little bit more, so I'm going to redo do all the steps I just did. Thumbnails are really small, so I'm being a little bit nitpicky when I probably don't really need to be, but we're gonna go ahead and do it anyway. I'm gonna delete the previous one. I think I just deleted the layer mask, so we're just gonna make sure the layer is actually gone here. Reposition him a little bit. Now, looking back at the other thumbnail, it looks like I had some highlights. Let me make sure. Yeah, I need to resize this one a little bit. Looks like I had it tilted a little bit more too. I think that's more like what I had. Alright, I don't want to get too crazy because I'm already like, it's not the same size. Okay, we're gonna go ahead and we're gonna add a new layer so I can start working on these highlights. Now, this is actually pretty simple. It's just a soft brush, and then we're gonna change the blending mode. I need to find the colors. Here we go. I went ahead and pulled the same colors from the other thumbnail, that way I wasn't guessing. So what you want to do is have the color you want to work with selected. I'm hitting the eyedropper tool with the eye shortcut on my keyboard. I'm hitting B for the brush. I'm gonna go up here and make sure it's a soft brush. Having the layer I just made selected, I'm just gonna paint just like this. I need to drag this layer below the character too. I know it looks kind of crazy right now. That's okay, we're gonna fix it and then it'll look way better. Now, I'm gonna go in here to the blending modes, and I do believe it was on color dodge before. So about like this. And now I'm gonna switch it to white because I do believe I had a little bit in the corner edge. I hit Control Z to undo. Something like this. Now I'm being nitpicky. Alright, we'll just leave it like that. I'm gonna add another new layer, and what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna start adding some light onto his armor so it makes it look like the light's actually reflecting off his armor a bit. I'm gonna go in here and I'm gonna make a new layer. I'm gonna drag this one above the character layer, and I'm gonna do the same thing with the brush. I'm gonna make it smaller with my close bracket key. Make sure I have the orange selected. I'm just gonna swap my swatches, my foreground and my background with the X key. That's the shortcut I just used, and I'm just gonna drag around the edge. Again, this is gonna look sloppy. I'm gonna show you how to fix it here in a moment. We're gonna use a clipping mask to make sure it is constrained within this character as well. We're gonna change the blending mode here to overlay like this. We're gonna turn down the opacity so it's not as crazy strong, like so. And then we're gonna clip it to the Master Chief here. I think that looks good. In order to make a clipping mask, the easiest way to do it is to go into your layers panel in between the two layers and hold down Alt and click. And that'll keep whatever's in the top layer constrained within the bottom layer here. Alright, the one thing I didn't drag from the other layer I had was my lens flare that I put over his mask here to make that white highlight more apparent. So I'm going to go ahead and make a new layer. I'm going to go up here to filter, I'm going to go down here to render, and then I'm going to go to lens flare. You can always find a lens flare off of the internet. I do believe I need to have something in this layer. Fill it with black. We're gonna go up here to filter. We're gonna go down here to render. We're gonna go to lens flare, and then I'm going to pick a style. Let's go with this one. I believe it's the one I used. Fine. And then I'm going to resize it down because it's too big here. I'm gonna resize it way down. I'm gonna drag it over here, resize it a bit more, and I'm gonna change the blending mode to screen. This is gonna knock out the black background here. You can also add a layer mask to this and then paint out what you don't want. So I can see that the edges are still kind of there because it probably had a little bit more going on than just simple flat black. So I'm going to drop the opacity a little bit. I'm going to add a layer mask by clicking on this camera looking icon down here. And then I'm going to paint with black. I'm going to have my brush and I'm going to paint with black just to remove some of the extra. You can't even really see it, but I know it's there because of how that was just created. So we're just going to remove that. And if I turn it on and off, you can see it just makes a little bit more light. Throws a little bit more attention to it. It's not a huge detail, but these little details actually add up. Alright, I believe that's all I did to the characters. So now what I need to focus on is the actual text itself. And I'm going to go ahead and turn the colors off for right now. I'm gonna hit the T key on my keyboard and I'm gonna click once in the layer. It's gonna automatically create a text layer. I'm gonna type out the word awesome. Don't hit enter, just click the check mark. I always want to hit enter to confirm the effect or whatever change I just made. It doesn't work well when you do that on text. But besides the point, we're going to go in here to the layer styles again, and we're going to double click beside the layer name to get that option open. First thing we're going to do is add a gradient overlay. We are then going to make sure we have that tab selected, and I am going to change it to a gray. I'm sure you guys have seen this before. It's very popular with gaming thumbnails. We're going to go ahead and pick a gray color here. I am going to add a couple more. We're going to add an inner glow, and we're going to add a drop shadow. The drop shadow is a bit much, so we're going to back the size of it down. The size is actually dealing with how spread out the drop shadow is here, which is confusing because there's also a spread option. This is making it look more feathered. That's how I remember it anyway, so we're going to make that kind of subtle. We're going to back the distance up a little bit, and then we're going to check the glow. This is just going to give it that inner glow, make it look a little neon around the edges. This one can be kind of tricky to see, so you guys might not be able to see it well because even I can't see it well. It's that subtle. We're going to go ahead and zoom in here to make sure. Yeah, that's crazy subtle. What about normal? Would that make it easier? Okay, we're gonna hit enter. We're gonna be able to see it more when I do the thumbnail text because it's gonna be orange. That one's gonna be on overlay. Alright, so now that we have the inner glow, the drop shadow, and the gradient overlay on here, we're gonna go ahead and duplicate the layer. The easiest way to do that is to just hold down your Alt key and click and drag. You can hold down Shift to keep it in line with the other one. It's not really gonna matter here because I'm gonna change it. Double click and type the word thumbnail. Click the check mark, go into your layer styles, and we're going to change the gradient overlay to the orange color that I always associate with gaming thumbnails now. Let me go here, go to orange, click the orange, and then we're going to need to change the inner glow to actually be overlay. I always do that. You don't have to hit OK, it's just a reflex for me. We're going to change this to overlay to give it more of an orangish yellow look. I'm going to select both text layers in the layers panel by clicking Shift and clicking on the two layers. I'm going to hit Control G to group them, and then I'm going to go Control T. We're going to resize them. That might be a bit much, and then I'm going to rotate them like so. That might be a bit too much of a rotation. Something like this. This is where it becomes a preference, what looks best here. The gradient, I'm gonna have to move a little bit. I'm gonna show you how to do that as well. This comes down to like making things fit and work well together, so this could take you a while depending on what you're going for. I also need to resize the word awesome. Probably shrink down the word thumbnail a little bit. I just did it together to get them into a position. So we are on the word thumbnail at the moment. We're going to shrink it. The character might be a little bit too big. We'll work on that here in a second. I'm going to turn on auto select. It's in the top panel here if you have your move tool selected, and then you can just click on whatever layer and it'll automatically jump to it instead of you trying to find it in your layers panel. This is good, but sometimes it can cause problems. That's why I had it off, because I'm going to be working with a lot of different layers here. Okay, so I believe in the original I had the text actually behind this subject here. We're going to click and drag the group underneath. Alright, that's fine. The next thing I'm going to work on is the background for the text. Believe it or not, it's just a brush stroke. I'm going to go to right below the text, and then I'm going to create a new layer. It's the little square with the plus in it. I am going to select the blue that I saved in here earlier. We're going to go to window, we're going to go to brushes, and I'm going to show you which one I'm using. I'm using one of the wet media brushes. Kyle Ultimate Thick and Thin is the brush I'm using here. I'm going to make it really big, so I'm pushing down on the open bracket key like this, and then I'm just going to click and drag upwards like so, and I kind of need to add a little bit there because I missed some, so we're going to try to line this up as best as I can and add that in, and then we're going to have to play with the angle of the text to kind of meet the angle of the line going across the top here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back up here, and I'm going to actually filter out my layers with this T. This will show all the text layers, and it'll make it easier to find them. So I'm just going to select both here and then hit Control T to rotate them like this. So we'll leave it about like that. And then we're going to turn this filter off by either clicking the T again or flipping this little switch. The only other thing I did to this layer was add an inner glow to get that extra blue there. I'm going to increase the size of this a little bit. So we're going to go up to like 70. Okay, that's cool. And then it becomes a positioning game here. So we're going to reposition the text and probably resize it because now it doesn't look like it's taking up enough space. So we're going to do it like this. Hit OK. Alright, once you have your inner glow on the blue background here, what I'm going to do now is go to the Photoshop logo that I already have in my document right here. What we need to do is actually delete the background. I'm going to go to my magic wand tool. I'm going to select the white. Again, make sure you have the layer you want to work with selected. I'm going to select the white. And I'm just going to hit delete, and then I'm going to deselect by hitting Control D, or you can go up here, select, and then down to deselect. It's the same thing. So I'm going to go to my move tool and I'm going to put it into the position that I actually want it to be in, and I'm going to go ahead and reselect it because I know I need to get rid of the white halo that is going to be around it. So we're going to go and hit Control, select it, then go to select and mask. What I'm going to do is actually shift the edge in a bit. I'm going to add some smoothing and then a little bit of feather. You don't want to go crazy with the feather because it does weird stuff when you do. And then we're going to pick new layer with layer mask. I don't think we need to decontaminate the colors here. We don't. So we're going to go new layer with layer mask and hit OK. And then it'll remove the white line around the subject. That's just bleeding from the background being white when we removed it. And the next thing I'm going to do is add a drop shadow and an inner glow. I apparently really like inner glow, so we're going to do that. We're going to add not the outer glow, but we are going to add a drop shadow to make it like this. That's fine. And we're going to actually change the perspective of this. You can just go up here to edit and then go down to transform, and perspective is under that. So I'm just going to move this a little bit. We're going to position it. I think I have these things positioned a little bit differently than the original. We're going to Control T it again and then shrink it down. I'm going to reposition all these elements here in a moment after I get them all on the canvas. There we go. And the last thing I did to the Photoshop thumbnail, which now I think is too small, background, sort of like I did over here. We're going to do another layer. I'm going to select the layer below the Photoshop logo that's currently visible. I'm going to hit new layer. Go to my eyedropper tool to select this light blue. Then I'm going to go to my brush tool, make sure it's on a soft brush, soft round brush. Make sure this is closed or it doesn't quite work right. We're going to resize it, and then we're just going to click behind there, and we are going to either set it on overlay or probably color burn. I think overlay looks better. You can change the opacity as you like as well. And that's all I did to the logo. So now this comes down to repositioning, maybe about right there. And then we're going to work on the last two elements I have in here. So we're going to work on the fire. This is actually really simple. I need to select that layer. All you have to do here when you have an image like this, a fire or a lens flare or whatever, you change the blending mode to screen and it'll knock out the black background for you. And then we're just going to position it. Auto select is off, so we're just going to move it down some here. I'm going to figure out where I want it. And if you have a little bit too much, like it's a little overwhelming, all you have to do is add a layer mask and then once again paint on it like I did at the beginning here. So we're going to go to our brush tool. It's already set to black, and then we can kind of remove some of this fire. So we're going to remove it from the Photoshop logo there. What you probably need to do to make sure you don't have to keep clicking the same place is set it to be a hard brush. Otherwise, you're going to have some that are faded and some that's not. And you can actually make a cool effect with that as well, but for now, I'm just going to remove some of this. That way, it doesn't take a bunch of time. And then the last thing I'm going to add is that rectangular border that I have. That's actually easier to make than it looks. I'm going to go ahead and lock this fire layer by clicking the lock icon in the layers panel. I'm going to click new layer. I'm going to go to my rectangle tool, and then I'm just going to click and drag a rectangle out. It's going to be a rounded rectangle. I'm not sure why it always it's going to be a rounded rectangle. I don't know why it always defaults to that, but what you want to do is go over here to your properties panel, and in this area right here, this is what's controlling the radius of the corners. All you have to do is click and drag and set it to 0, and it'll be a normal pointed rectangle. You want to position this before you remove the fill, which is what I'm about to do. I'm going to hit Control T, and I'm going to pull out the sides a little bit. So I'm going to hold down Alt so it pulls Alt and Shift, so it just pulls the left and right sides here like this. Hold down Alt and Shift and then pull from the top, and it'll pull the bottom and the top down and up. Alright, we need to make sure it's in the center. There are actually alignment buttons, so if I wanted to be particular, I could go down here, hit Control, and it's selecting both of them, and I can align it like that. So it was pretty close. We're gonna hit Control D to deselect. Now what I'm gonna do is take the fill and put it on none, and now you're not gonna see it. So now you have to find it. It should be at the top. I'm gonna go into the layer styles here, and I'm gonna put in inner shadow and go ahead and play with these settings. So that's all I actually did here, inner shadow, and then you mess with the opacity or the size to make it less or more strong depending on what you want it to look like, something like that. I'm gonna go back in here and resize the text as well after I add 2 adjustments that I always add to thumbnails, and that is hue and saturation. I'm gonna bump the saturation way up. If you go crazy, it does weird stuff, so you want to up it but not go all the way because it'll mess up the color, so about right there is fine. Now I'm going to lock it, and I'm going to add a brightness and contrast adjustment layer. So we're going to go over here and click the little circle near the bottom, go to brightness and contrast, and what I'm going to do is up the contrast a bit, like so, and that's how you get the colors I had in the original. And now it just comes down to adjusting the position and size of the different elements to make it look better, something like that. Anyways guys, if you want to see more videos like this, please let me know in the comment section below. Obviously this was my first Photoshop thumbnail video, and if you made it to the end, thanks so much for watching, and I will talk to you guys again soon. Bye!